Today, we have an extraordinary guest with us. We have Ms. Libby Hikind, who will be talking today and sharing her story and sharing her skills and expertise in the areas of grant writing. I am Sartora Schumann-Smith, your host for the webinar series, and I am going to briefly introduce Libby a little bit more. Libby, I did some research, so I hope that everything that I read, I got right. But we are honored to have you here for our audience and here at the Center for Women. Libby is the founder and CEO of GrantWatch.com. And Libby is a leading grant funding search engine. It's a leading grant funding search engine for nonprofits, businesses, and individuals. Now, Libby holds a postmaster's degree in educational administration and supervision, and is a wife, mother, grandmother, and this one blew me away, Libby, a great grandmother. So you need to write another book on how to look as fabulous as you do as a great grandmother. So Libby, I see we got the memo about the colors. This is Grant Writer Green for those who are wondering. But Libby, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. I'm truly honored. And I want to share what we learned throughout the years. GrantWatch started in 2010. When I finish the webinar, I will get into more of my background if you have questions, but I really want to start off and impart my knowledge to you, just in case we run out of time. This is part of the cover of my book, and there are hearts, and we released the book February 1st in time for Valentine's Day, but that's not why the hearts are there, and you're going to find out as we move along. So let's talk about how to win a grant. Before you think about winning a grant and you find a grant and you want to write it, you have to think, why do you want to win this grant? Is it just for the purpose of winning a grant? Is there something that you want to implement? Because we shouldn't write grants just because we want money, because money comes with priorities. You're making a commitment to do something, and you have to want to do that. So how will your grant help the audience that you serve? And if the grant is for you as an individual, how will it help you, and how will it help the community? How will it grow your organization? And does it fit with the mission of your organization? Because when you write a grant, if your organization is, and I always like to go back to preschool because that was the beginning of my teaching, but if your organization is a preschool, you're really not going to do a program for tourism. Just doesn't link up unless you're planning to go to the tourist agency and have the children stand there and sing and greet everyone. Unless you have find some connection, you won't apply for a tourist grant just because it sounds like, wow, they're going to give so much money. So there has to be a connection to what you want to do. Then besides the connection, you have to think about your eligibility. What are the eligibility requirements? So every single grant has different eligibility requirements. Occasionally, if it's from the same funding source, they may be the same, but they're different most of the time. What is the organization's capacity in terms of the eligibility? Let's say it says that you must be in operation for 5 years. You're only in operation for 1 year. You don't check the box. So what can you do? Or what if it says that you must have licensed psychologists employed and you don't have them, and you don't feel that that's what you want to do? So what can you do? So I always say, go down the street. There's another nonprofit organization that has some of the things that you need to be eligible for to apply for that grant. Now, when you go down the street, you say, can we work together? We found this grant. We check 9 out of 10 boxes. And when I say boxes, I'm talking about eligibility requirements. So you go down the street, you talk to that nonprofit, and you say, you have the one that we need. Do you want to work with us? You'll be a subcontractor. We'll write an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, or we'll form a consortium, or maybe we only check 4 of the boxes. You check 6 of the boxes. but we want to apply because we need that grant. We need that for our target audience. So you can be the lead organization. And this is how you work it out so that it's not just, well, we have to pass on it. If it's really what you want to do, find somebody else to work with. Now, on GrantWatch, which is my website, we let you know if there's a mandatory conference or not. Now, if it's a mandatory conference, mandatory means that if you didn't attend, you cannot apply. So don't apply. You might want to contact the funding source and say, hey, did you tape the conference? Is it possible to be in attendance by watching it? And if not, don't apply. Do you have enough time to meet the deadline? That's very important. If you're a nonprofit, I just want to tell you that when you write a grant turns the whole organization upside down because there's so many pieces that need to be brought together. And so there's different people within your organization that have to stop what they're doing and they have to work on it. So do you have enough time? The board has to sign off. When's the board meeting? Will the board call an emergency session? These are all things to think about before you start because you can write a beautiful grant. I spoke to somebody on Grant Talk the other day and she said to me, you know, we get these applications and they have to be signed off by the principal and the school district. And we get the applications without the signatures. Now, occasionally, they're very lean. This particular foundation is lenient. And she said, occasionally, the application is so great that we actually make a phone call and say, can you get the signature? But that only happens really if you apply in enough time so that you sent it in early, you didn't miss the deadline in that way. There's one other thing that's missing here. It was an LOI mandatory, a letter of inquiry or intent. If that is mandatory and you miss it, you cannot apply. Now, here's one thing that you must have. If you're applying for a grant and the eligibility says 501c3 nonprofit status, then unless the grant is due next year, you probably don't have enough time to get it. And usually what they want is your letter of determination from the IRS, which is actually on the IRS website if it's missing within your organization. But you need to apply. Now, not every grant has an application for a 501c3. Some of them could be a 501c4, some other status. And sometimes it's a state application and they only want you to be at minimum a not-for-profit registered with the state. You have to read the eligibility requirements carefully. A lot of these things sound like common sense, but so many people get hung up with this. So that's why we're reviewing it. Oh, you know, I'm going to go back to this for a moment. We had a grant writer who worked for a client, and they said they were a 501c3 nonprofit. They weren't. They wanted the grant writer to submit and say that they were, even though they didn't have the letter of determination. It wasn't being asked for. The grant writer refused. The grant writer said, go and find a fiscal sponsor. And under the fiscal sponsor, the fiscal sponsor is a 501c3 nonprofit, and through them you can apply. So you have to be very careful if you're taking on a client. Make sure that they have all their ducks in a row before, because when it comes time to paying you, they're going to say it's your fault, and you don't want it to be your fault. Follow directions. So such a simple word, right? But guess what? There are some organizations that get 1,000 applications. And let's say you're writing a federal grant. I went to review a federal grant years ago. There were 1,000 applications. They were only going to fund 40. Now, if you didn't follow directions, you were weeded out in the first review. It never went anywhere. But if you don't follow directions on some local yokel kind of foundation, they may like what you're doing so well that they might overlook it. But you don't want to take a chance. If I was running the foundation, even if it was a local one, I would be a stickler. So I wouldn't take any chance there. So reread the application. This is what I used to do. It was the beginning of computers when I started writing grants in the 80s, but it still works today. I print out the application, incomplete, fully. And then I print out any other directions that came along with it. And I hole punch them. I put them in a binder. I buy these little arrows that your lawyer sends you, sign here, and I use them because they're very reusable and they don't hide over things. And I use a highlighter. And on the side, I make lists. I take out an Excel doc and I just keep making a list of every single item it says I will need. In a government grant, you're going to need a lot of different things. You might need the blueprints. You might need the license to operate. You might need letters of support. You might need memorandums of understanding. There are so many things that you could need. And so I make lists and I get those, you know, so if I'm writing the grant and if it's not writing time for me, it's gathering time for me. How to apply, it tells you. So you don't want that to be the last minute where, uh-oh, I have to upload it. I thought I could mail it. Oh no, I have to mail it. One grant application needed 10 copies and a DVD years ago. Every place is different. Does it require an LOI? When is the due date? All of these things you need to mark off. And do you have to attend the mandatory conference? What time, what must you include in the application? A Head Start grant has about 100 appendices that go in the application. What's the font and the margins and the spacing and the number of pages? Sometimes there's a character count and the format for printing and submission directions. All of these things you need to highlight, rewrite. I used to create a submission direction form. Now, this is mine. I coined this phrase, PMF, Passion Maps and Folders. Years ago, when I started doing all the PR and speaking, I had to remember, because I don't write things down. This is very rare for me to have something in front of me, because normally I speak without anything in front of me. And I wanted to say this, and so I created this PMF, and I hope it helps you to remember Passion Maps and Folders. That's what grants are all about. And why do I say, and that's why there are hearts on my book, passion. If you don't have passion for the subject that you're writing about, don't write about it, give it to somebody else, because your energy, how you feel about the topic and what you want to do must jump off the page. Even if all you're doing is filling out an application online, there's going to be some description of your project. Even if it's 3 lines, it's either going to be boring or it's going to be so exciting that I want to join you. That's basically what happens. If you have passion for something, whoever else is on your team within the organization needs to jump on board. And how do they jump on board? Because passion is contagious. And you need to have that. Now, if you're a grant writer, you're working for an agency and they want you to write a grant about Alzheimer's, and you have some family member, I hope nobody does, that suffers from it, you may have passion for that particular topic. If you have no relationship to that topic, unless you can get with it and you can really find the passion, don't write that application, because you're going to shortchange the agency. If you're writing about single moms and you've experienced that, and this is help for single moms, you may have a great deal of passion for that subject matter, and it will show. And you can find somebody else within the organization that shares, that has the passion, and sometimes you could just listen to them, just like an actor goes and spends a lot of time when it's a movie about some family or something, right? They may spend some time with the family so that they can really get that feeling. So maybe as a grant writer, you could spend that time even on a Zoom or Skype call with that person and try to see if you can catch the passion. Now, you need community excitement and participation, because if you want letters of support, you need people on board. I spoke with somebody, I don't remember what it was. It was, I think, an estuary grant. And she said that everybody in the community where they were writing for in that particular area had to be on board with the application. You couldn't say that you were going to correct a problem in a lake if the HOA that was bordered on the lake didn't want it. You had to get everybody on board. And that's how you show it with these letters of support. And passion is, can you make a believer out of the reader? Will it jump off the page for them? Because they have to catch your passion to go in. And that's what makes the difference. If you make a mistake somewhere in your application with one of the things, I don't know, your margin was 1.2 instead of 1.0, right? And somebody's a stickler for it, but your passion jumps off the page and they are on board with what you want to do. If it's not a government grant, they may overlook it. With a government grant, there's no overlooking. They must follow the rules because then somebody can sue, you know, obviously. Okay, so how did I start grant writing? I wanted my students to love to write. I was a special education teacher in a junior high. The students had to take a test in order to be promoted, and they had to take the same test as the mainstream students. And I really couldn't teach my students to write any better than they were because they would take the paper and throw it up, you know, crunch it up and throw it at me. That was special education at that point. There was no medication in the schools in the early 80s, so late 70s, early 80s. So what was going to happen was somehow either I would teach them or they would not be promoted. And that's how I ended up learning to write a grant. It's all in the book. I can tell it to you at the end of the webinar if we have time. But that's how it started for me. And because I had that passion, I went after school every day to the district office. Somebody there was mentoring me and teaching me, and I wrote this grant, and it was my first grant. I'd never written a grant before. I wasn't really a writer. And as a matter of fact, I did not do well in English composition at Brooklyn College, which is a joke. I should go back and find the teacher who didn't give me the A that I wanted. And because now I am a published author. But I wrote this grant to Radio Shack Tandy, and we won. So everybody that's listening, if you are not, if you're thinking, I'm going to learn about grants, but we're going to hire a grant writer, write your first grant yourself. For many reasons we're going to come to, but you want your passion to come into it, and you may win. You may really surprise yourself if you're doubting yourself. So write it yourself. And then I went on, I wrote many grants, but these are two that are my standout grants for me. There was a youth gang drug prevention program, and my school district didn't believe that there were youth gangs in the area, but I knew differently, having taught my classes and hearing whispers. And I wrote this grant. And then the Staten Island Children's Health, Child Health Plus grant, that's when they started many years ago. And as a result, over 46,000 in 2014, I think when I called, sometime around then, I was told that children had gotten health insurance as a result of it. This was a whole consortium between many, many different groups. And this just came about because I was very passionate about it, and we won. So now MAPS, what am I talking about? Consistency is the name of the game when it comes to writing a grant. Everything needs to flow. You want to go from, these are the parts of the narrative of a grant: needs, goals, measurable objectives, some people call them outcomes, activities, timelines, evaluation, and budget. Of course, you're going to have organizational capacity, you're going to have your fiscal management, you're going to have all these other little pieces, but this is the meat of your application. And if you just have to write an LOI, you may have one or two sentences about each of these, a letter of intent, to see if you'll be eligible to apply for the full grant. But these pieces are very important, and each one needs to flow into the other. So right here, can I do this for you here? Now think about for a minute your elevator pitch. And this is also, if we go back to passion, it's all part of it. What's the current state, your stats, your evidence, the state of your the area? That's your needs. Now you can include so much in the needs. You can include articles that prove it. You can include the census. You can include the map. You might have a local census. You can include reading scores. If it's tourism, you can include charts that show the downward trend. If it's a crime application, you can include those stats. So many things. If it's EV, you can include how, you know, the numbers of that haven't increased. Whatever it is, you can find the proof for. And you can also include best practices, looking at literature and quote them. Now, what is it about the funding source that makes you think that they're going to fund you? So on GrantWatch, we actually have the 990 reports. So when you're looking at a grant application on GrantWatch, there's a page which we call the grant detail page. So on GrantWatch, there are little blurbs about each grant. And when you're a Member Plus subscriber, which is what we call our paid subscribers, you can click it and you will see a full description of the grant application. And then you'll click to the grant, to the actual grant application that the funding source put up. But you can also view 990 reports. So if we have it on the foundation grants, that doesn't have anything to do with government grants. If we have the 990 report, you'll be able to go in there and see who they funded in the past, if they listed it. And you'll see, oh, we are like that organization. Let's say it's a sports and recreation grant, and they funded building playgrounds or in communities. And that's what you're trying to do. And they still fund your target area. Then you know they will want to fund you. But if they don't do that, if they fund scientific exploration and you're looking for a playground, it's not a match. Okay, what is your organization most capable of solving? Why is your organization most capable of solving the need? So there's a need in your community and you say you can fix it, you can solve it. What is it about you that says you can do that? And what are your goals? What goals will alleviate the problem? What are the actual deliverables and by what date? Your objectives should always have a date. And what actions will accomplish the objective? Those are your activities and they go in your timeline. How much money is needed? That's your budget. Now, if you need 50,000 and a grant application is only giving 10, you may want to then show your in-kind support from other areas. If you already applied for a grant and you got 30,000 for that, you need 20 more. This one's going to give you 10 if you win. And you have 10 either in kind, which means that somebody's donating supplies or their work, or 10 from somewhere else, list it. And how will we measure each objective? That's your evaluation. Why is the grant award needed? That's your needs. Research, community stats of the substantive needs, substantiate the needs. Best practices include neighborhood maps and quote studies and newspaper articles. And now this is how I wanted to show you. This is called mapping. You take the need, there's a goal, objective, activities, evaluation. If you have a need, you need to continue. So now I want to read you something. In the book, I just want to open this up so you understand where I'm coming from. I created a fictitious community. Why? Because I wanted to show you how to map. Okay, I'm providing this sample map so you can coast through the first draft of your grant application. Feel free to use my sample map when writing your own grant. Let's begin by calling our fictitious town Coastville. Now, if I spelled it wrong somewhere, please let me know. It's located in the mythical Grant County, California. Our imaginary nonprofit will be called Pre-Escolar Fantasia, and the fabricated funding source will be the Geld for Good Foundation. Pre-Escolar Fantasia wants to expand their existing preschool site and set up 4 new sites for early school preschool programming for a total of 500 children all across Coastville for the migrant children of Central America coming from Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. Notice our map starts with needs. This leads us to goals. Then we develop our objectives and activities. We conclude with the evaluation. As I create my map, I keep my Excel document open or a plain notepad on the side to list all the items I will need to include in my budget. So this is a fictitious neighborhood that I created for you. And here you have here's the needs. Foreign-born residents in coastal have diverse linguistic backgrounds, requiring effective communication strategies among caregivers to support the unique developmental needs of migrant children. So my goal is to facilitate effective communication. Now, basically what I'm saying is that the migrants, there are two parents, they may be married, and that's what we found in a fictitious town, they're married. However, their children need care because they're both working to earn a living. So we need to facilitate effective communication. And here, if you look, increase the percentage of caregivers who actively participate in communication workshops by 20% by the end of the school year. And that's a low amount, but understand these people are working or trying to, aiming to enhance their ability to understand and support the unique developmental needs of migrant children. And how are we going to do that? We're going to host monthly caregiver forums with interpreters and cultural liaisons to discuss the importance of effective communication in child development, provide information about the upcoming preschool programs, address concerns and gather feedback. And then how are we going to monitor it? We can have a workshop attendance, survey caregivers, measure the increase in caregivers' understanding of developmental needs through pre and post workshop assessments. So each of these go on the timeline later on, because you have to say, well, this is the needs, these are the goals. The objectives will happen because we're going to do these activities during this time frame, and we're going to have a pre-evaluation and a post-evaluation. And so I did this. I'm going to go through this quickly with you. I would like you to just skim over it yourself right now on the screen, because I don't think you need me to read to you. And you hear, what's our goal? Create a secure and supportive environment. And we know that the children are suffering right now. And we always want to include preschool in the preschool program, culturally sensitive activities. And then here we go. Here's another one. We want to prioritize language development. And of course, I'm going this route in my pretend neighborhood, because we know that a lot of times the children of the children of immigrants and migrants, they are the ones that actually teach their parents the language. So we want to teach in preschool. And here we go to this one. An inclusive atmosphere. You see here, they're married couples with children in coastal. That's how I created my unique neighborhood, that the people are all married. But it's not true. I just created this, okay? Just to give you an example of how to line things up one at a time. And every need has a goal. If you have a need, now you may have 25 needs in your community, but you want to run a certain program. That's your activities, right? So only talk about the needs that pertain to your goals, your objectives, your activities, and your evaluation. Otherwise, you've confused me. And that's what grant reviewers will tell you. If you interview a grant reviewer, I was one, you get very confused, like, okay, so you told me this, and you told me that, and you told me this and that, but why? And I get phone calls a lot of times where people want to talk about why they need a grant. And they found a grant, and I just need them to, you just need to zero in on what it is you're applying for. And here we want to ensure preparedness for success. And we want them to transition to school, right? We want them to go to kindergarten after the preschool. And we have low numbers. Why? If it's not attainable, don't put it, don't put it as your goal or your objective. Here's your 25% over the next 2 quarters. If you say, if I wrote, my objective is 100%, now I think they're going to fund me. No, they know. If your mission and vision of what you want to do is matching up to the funding source knows what's possible and what's not possible. So don't overreach because you will not get funded. Take a small amount and accomplish something. And here's your timeline. And you start out with the very, very beginning. You receive the grant award notification. What are you going to do? Now, person responsible, I didn't go through this, but you should always have in your timeline who's responsible to do what. And these people will match up to the CVs that you will submit. And if you don't have that person, then you'll be submitting job descriptions. And so the same thing. So just put the title of the person over here next to each one. And I just went to 14, up to here to 14 months. If it's a 2-year grant, then you want to show 24 months. If it's, you see, and the reason why I did 14 months is because you're really not getting started once it's announced. It takes a little while for the check to arrive. And never, I just want to tell everybody, never spend the money before it's in your bank account. Don't obligate yourself to anything until you've received the funds. You can interview, you can tell the people we're waiting for the check, but never spend a dime. Now here's your budget. Your budget builds your application. If you can't do it within the amount of money they're offering, and you don't have other money to get that you can obtain, you can't apply and say that you're going to run 5 preschool classes if there's not enough money there. You can, okay, you could say, well, I can also start applying for other grants, but then a funding source wants to know that if they give you money, it's going to happen. So you want to bring in all those other funds into it. Now you can have in kind, you can have somebody that says, I'm going to donate this amount of money to you, but I really want you to be applying for other grants because it's quite a large amount for us. We'd like to really give you a little bit less. But as long as they're willing to sign their name to it, then you can apply. But if you don't have it, don't say you're going to do something smaller. There's enough money there for 1 preschool class. Then do that. And you can say that we're going to apply for other funds to increase. So how much money is allocated? Can you obtain the from outside sources? How much can your organization provide as in-kind? And use Excel and create equations. That's how I work. I create an Excel document. I write an equation. Let's say, and let me go through this for a minute. You need a teacher. The teacher, for a parenting teacher, let's say. The parenting teacher is only going to be working 2 hours a day for 4 days. So that's 8 hours. So if you take 1 FTE, 1 human being, 1 person, that's 1.0. But this teacher is really only working 0.2. It's 1 day, 1 out of 5 days. So 2 times 5 is 10. So that's how you get your 1.0. This gets confusing, but when you do Excel, in Excel, if you take the teacher's salary, the whole, let's say that parenting teacher worked a full week on teaching parenting, what would that salary be? Now multiply that salary by 0.2. That's the amount of money you want to budget. You don't want to budget the whole time. Now you could use that teacher for another grant. You can't hire somebody necessarily, somebody of quality for 2 hours a day for 4 days a week. But you can, if you have other programs, you can hire them for that. And then you can take the rest of the teacher's salary and put it in there. The budget builds your application. In your budget, you want your personnel and your expenditures and your in-kind. Limit the amount used for administration. This is where so many organizations go wrong. They want the money, but they don't necessarily want to run the program. So they give a lot to administration and very little to the program. The funding source is not going to fund you. They want to see what are you putting into play. Now, if there's a grant just for general support, that's very different. They'll give you the money that goes for general support of the organization. You can use it for administration. Use the percentage of FT, which I just showed you, and do the same thing as in kind. If somebody's going to give you 25 laptops. You need to look it up online, that model number, find out the going price for it, and then you can put that in as in-kind support, that total amount. Money never changed hands, but it's in-kind support. And the same thing even if you don't have this person hired yet, the percentage of the FTE. And just when it comes to administration, if the supervisor of this program, the director of the organization, the CEO, whoever is applying, right? If the top person is going to spend the equivalent of half a day a week on this program, whatever the amount of time all week, you count up the hours and you project that this is how much time that top level person is going to spend, then you can put that top level person's salary in, the total amount, and that would be, if it's a half a day, it would probably be 0.1, let's say. So you have to come up with your equations and figure it out. Or you can do an hourly. If somebody's only being paid hourly, then you don't have to do a percentage. You can just do their hourly into the budget. Now, every budget gets a narrative. And the narrative is written like this. Funds are requested for the parenting teacher to work with 25 parents, 2 classes of 25 parents 2 times a week for a total of, and then explain your equation. So everything in your budget, just write it that way. Funds are requested for. That's how I do it in a government grant. Now, this is what I did. Each of these here, you look at them, these are those goals, needs, objectives, evaluation. So while I'm doing it, I have to say, what do I need to do this part of my mapping, which is the first one, the first slide I showed you, to facilitate effective communication. I need to include the cost or value of in-kind support for interpreters. I need cultural liaisons for caregiver forums. I need meeting spaces or community centers and informational materials. So all of these things that I need have to go in the budget. And I need to mention it in my narrative. So while you're not necessarily going to take your map, unless they give you a map, and put it into the document, and if you have a lot of space, if the document, if the grant application doesn't limit your space, you could put a map in. But that's not your narrative. This is a map. When you write about your activities, you must include what you need to do the activities. Because when I get to the budget, I need to have heard why you need cultural liaisons or why you need informational materials for caregivers. Everything has to go and be shown there. So I wrote it down here for you. So if this is prioritize language development, bilingual, multilingual educators and language development specialists, bilingual storybooks, educational games, all of these things cost money. Now, let's say you don't need to buy bilingual storybooks because there's a bookstore and they want to participate. And you're going to give them some advertising about it, right? When you do your press release, you're going to say where this extra money came from. They're going to donate bilingual storybooks. It's still in your budget, but it's listed under in-kind. Maybe they're going to give you some educational games. Maybe the community center is going to run a community outreach program. So that would come into in-kind. And now you can show, wow, you're giving us 50,000, but we really are going to have a program that's valued at 100,000 because we have all this extra. And that shows great community support. And if somebody's writing you a letter of support, in that letter, if the bookstore is giving you a letter of support, in that letter, it should say what they're giving you. Okay, so now in my book, here we go, I'm supposed to show it to you again. In my book, The Queen of Grants, there's a whole chapter on folders. And in the folders, I list what you should have. This is how you start. If you're working for an organization or you plan to, or it's your own organization, you want to create a place where you keep these folders. Now, I like a hard copy. I like to see it saved in the cloud, in a Dropbox, a Google Drive, something like that. And I'd like to see you save it on a thumb drive, which is a removable disk, a removable, whatever you call them nowadays. Save it in 3 places. Things get lost and get erased, and keep updating it. I list everything that belongs in these folders. This is how you get grant ready. If you didn't find a grant for what you want to do right now, which is usually not the case, because we have an expression at GrantWatch, if you want to do something good, there's a grant for it. So, but if you're not ready to apply, start gathering everything that's listed. And this is just a small sampling. This list goes on to about 3 pages. So I just didn't want to put it up here. This is just a small sample for the organizational and capacity and strengths folder. List of awards and recognitions. If you've gotten any grants in the past, even if it's $25, $500, list it. Keep it on a list. Every grant you get, you got $1,000 from somebody gave you $500 in kind. They gave you printing materials or something. You had a run for a walkathon, and somebody printed all the hats for you. That's an in-kind grant. That shows that somebody somewhere trusts your organization and knows that you are going to use grant funds appropriately. And every one of those lists builds. That's your building blocks. That's the cascade compounding effect of getting grants. If you're getting $500 and $1,000 grants this year, next year, you're going for $5,000 and $10,000 grants because you have a list. You're not a no-name anymore. You want any descriptions of any programs and services offered by your program, by your organization. Anything you do, keep it in this folder. Good press, positive articles written about your organization or key staff members. Now, GrantWatch has a web, part of GrantWatch is Grant News. And if you have a program that you're running that you feel is replicable and valuable to somebody in another area, we want to write about you. We want to interview you. So just call the office and tell us about your program. And then you'll be able to take that article in Grant News and put it into the appendices of your grant application. You've been written, you're published, it's all over the web. That's how you do things. If you have a podcast about something great that you did, you want to save it, make sure, it's on YouTube. You never know, maybe your YouTube account gets hacked. Save it in your folder. Save the transcript as well. And any previously written grant applications, even if somebody worked for the organization 10 years ago and they wrote something, there is gold inside that application that you can use. Not the whole thing, but there are pieces. There's the history. It's in there of the organizational capacity. Now here, what I want to show you here is, this is a table of organization. And this was done also for this fictitious community. You have your board, your administrative director, and then you are saying you have an educational principal for 2 preschool programs. And here it's for 3. And here's your parenting program, your educational director, your family workers. Here are your classes. This is the way I like to draw things out and make them very colorful. If as a grant reviewer, this would have given me like, I just sat reading 25 pages and now there's a picture. I'm so happy I don't have to read this page. I can peruse the picture and it's mapping everything out and it's explaining everything you said before. So now here, this is a little faded, so I apologize. When I put it in, I didn't have time to redo it. But if you look closely, here I list the governing body. And here's my policy committee. Just putting people connected to different people and showing all the relationships is really a good thing, and making it colorful. Now we get to, this is what every funder wants to know. 3 things: sustainability, replicability, and dissemination. Why sustainability? They don't want a one and done. They don't want to give you money and then goodbye. They want to see, how are you going to continue when the funds run out? And you need to figure out what your organization is going to do. Don't commit yourself to something I write here that you don't want to do. Maybe you don't want to go to donors. Maybe you don't have anybody to reach out to people. It may not be your thing. Maybe you're going to apply for more funding. You like, different people do different things. I'm not one that would ever like to go and ask for money. It's just not my thing. And a lot of times, if I worked somewhere and I really believed in what it was, I took money out of my pocket and gave it to them instead of having to make phone calls. It's not my thing. I can speak to you, but it's just not me. Other people, that's what they do best. They can sell the organization. They can bring in millions of dollars to an organization, but they can't write a grant. So you have to know who your people are. So how are you going to sustain the program? You're going to apply for different grants. You're going to use donor support. You're going to go to your alumni and do a mailing campaign. And who is it that's responsible for seeking these additional funding resources? And how successful have they been in the past? Now, you may say that you're going to have a dinner, and that dinner usually brings in X number of dollars, and all that money this year is being earmarked for this program to continue it for the second year. That's sustainability. If you can prove that in the past you've received funds. Now, replicability. Is your program replicable? Can another town or city use your program? Could another school district take your program and replicate it? That is, now we don't want to think about copywriting and things like that. If we're in the nonprofit sector, we want to say that what we're doing can be used somewhere else successfully. Now, if you're a business and you applied for a grant and you're copywriting, you applied for a grant to write curriculum and you're copywriting it, well, okay, then it can be used somewhere else because you copyrighted it. You know, they can buy it and it can be used in this and this location. So that's another story. But in the nonprofit world, we're more into replicating it, networking, being in touch with other people in the same situations. So tell them where it could be replicated, what circumstances would it be under, and who's going to benefit, and how will they learn about your program? How do you plan to disseminate your findings and evaluation? They want to know this. And then we go to dissemination. So are you going to do a press release? Are you, with permission, always say with permission of the funding source, because maybe they don't want you to do that. Do you have a podcast? Do you have a communication with a local TV station? Do you have a PR person on board who does this? Tell them how you're going to disseminate it. Are you going to put it into a scientific journal? Whatever it is, show how it's going to happen. And also you can suggest some joint activities with you and the funding source that you'd like to do. Now, your communication, right here, cultivating relationships with grant makers, donors, funding sources. Everybody has a different name for their for how they get grants. You want to start off with the thank you letter. You want to continue to have communication during the grant cycle. You want to tell them when your timelines are met. You want to send them photos. You want to send them videos. You want to talk about successes. This child learned English and is now able to read on a 3rd grade reading level. You know, you had this preschooler and somehow this preschooler was so bright. They're now reading on a 3rd grade level because of preschool. That's a success, okay? Participant letters, people that participated in the program should write you a letter, and then you should be able to take those letters with permission and send them to the funding source. If they're giving you money, especially if it's a family foundation that's giving the money, they want to feel good. They did this with the money. If I make a donation somewhere, I want to feel good and know that because I donated to this particular school, somebody got a scholarship, and what's happening with them. Dissemination activities, you want all of them, and reach out every 3 to 6 months with something positive. Keep that in, mark your calendars. What I found from people, let me go back here. What I found in interviewing people on Grant Talk, the nonprofits are getting grants second, third, fourth, and fifth year from the same funding source. They didn't have to reapply. The funding source called them up and said, hey, we have some extra money. We had a grant. We gave out all these grants already, and there's some change. We want to send it to you. And there's a lot of change out there, because if you apply for a grant and you do your budget and the grant says $10,000, well, your budget might only equal $9,500. And you can't figure out another thing to put in there that you need to run that program. That 500 is still sitting in the funding source that's going to go to somebody they funded in the past. Let that be you. Now, I speak about GrantWatch quite a bit because that's my baby. And this is why you should be on GrantWatch. First of all, we only charge $199 and we don't raise our prices. Even during the whole economic downturn, COVID, everything, we stayed the same. Our price is not higher if you have a large nonprofit. It's not smaller if you have a small nonprofit. We leveled the playing field for everyone. Nobody could hire someone for $199 for a year to search what we search for you. There's no way. So we're a tremendous savings. You can, if you can test it out for $18 a week, $45 a month, $90 for 3 months, for $199. And I understand that some of the smaller struggling nonprofits, $199 is even hard. So go to one of your people that gives you funds and ask them to get an account for you and let them pay for it. And explain to them that if you have this, you can apply for grants. We started in 2010. We have 27 to 28,000 grants in our database. We currently available, this fluctuates. It fluctuates all the time. We keep trying to get more, but understand that grants have deadlines. They come due. So we think we're riding high and we're going to be able to go much higher. But then, the end of the month comes and the grant deadlines happen, or the ongoing grants run out of money, and we just keep filling them up. And we don't wait to the end of the month. Every single day we add new grants. And we add legitimate grants. So at this point, they all have a mantra that says that if somebody's charging money for the grant application, we don't put it in. We found some small grants where everybody had to pay $15 and then the winner got the money. We don't put that in. We review the grants and then we archive them and we update them when they come due again. It's very easy to search. We have many different search bars, and some search bars will give, some of the searches will give you one, will give you some grants, and some searches will give you another. We tell you to use all of them. And you can, every grant that you've looked at, there's a place under my account on GrantWatch where you can click it and it will tell you the grants you viewed, so you can go back to it. If you look at something today and 3 days from now you say, well, I think I passed that one up, I'm really thinking we should go for it, you can go back into your viewed grants and you can find it. And you can click and put them on a grants calendar if you'd like to use our calendar or use your own. And we have the best customer service. I have the greatest staff. Our customer service is in the United States. And they will take your phone calls, they will take your chats, they will respond to your emails. And we are open from 9 to 6, Monday through Friday. You can call us over the weekend and leave us a message. And you can write to us as well. This is the front of GrantWatch. And this moves constantly, so you can see all the different grants and things like that. This is a keyword search. And this is the second part of that same page. And this was just this morning where I took the snip. It changes every single day, these numbers. Okay, so we have grants for individuals. We have grants for small businesses. The website is, you can, over here on the top, oh, I don't have the browser bar, but in your browser, if you, instead of writing grantwatch.com, if you wrote florida.grantwatch.com, you would be on the Florida page. and all the grants there are eligible for someone in Florida. You have a change location over here, so you can pick your state. If you're in Canada, we have the Canadian provinces as well. We have some international in Israel too. This is, we're testing AI at this point, so it's not really an AI search. We'd like you to put your questions in because we're training a model. The 990s are here. This is another search bar. If you're a funding source, you can list the grant here. Our pricing, as I told you, there's 4 price points. We have many different resources. Now we have Grant Talk, which I'll show you in a minute, and we have Grant News, which is our newsletter. And under the media tab, you can see me on television in many different places. Okay, so let's go here. And this is now why Grant Writer Team. So Grant Writer Team, I just want to explain to you is Grant Writer Team will match. You can put up a classified ad for a grant writer there, and you can put it up for 1, 2, 3, or 4 weeks, and you can then access the list of grant writers. If you're a grant writer, you can put up your profile, and then you can contact the people that made the classified ad. You'll have that information. That's only basically paying for something, and it's very minimal, gives you access. We don't take any commission at all. It's just a way, it's like the LinkedIn of grant writing. This is going to come out this week, probably tomorrow. This is what one of the clips on Grant Talk will look like. You can all do me one favor to say thank you. Go to YouTube, go to GrantWatch and subscribe and watch one of our videos, and that will help us tremendously so that we can get more videos out. If you win a grant that you found on GrantWatch, you get a 17-ounce latte mug as a gift if you send us the information. If you don't send it to us, we don't know. And this is the cover of the book. Now, you might just want to jot this down while I'm asked a question or two. You can buy the book on Amazon if you'd like. If you want to see it on GrantWatch, it's grantwatch.com/book. It will link to the Amazon. That's our phone number, and that's our email address. Go ahead, ask me something, and I'm sorry I used up all your time.
No. Thank you, Libby. I see now why you are the queen of grants. I could not keep up with what I was writing. It's like, oh my gosh, she has so much information. And if you are on this call and you are a grants writer, your hands should be sore from writing. But if you are on this call and you are a novice to grant writing or have never written a grant, I promise you, Libby, and I'm not just saying this because we're here in front of the world, I have never heard this much information, so thorough and so detailed. That is such incredible information for our viewers, for those who are watching. From the start, the first thing that you said that just really got to me, why are you writing this grant? Is it just for the money? Because if that's the reason that you're doing it, that is the wrong reason, because there are so many parts to that. We did have a few questions, but I think just like everybody, I'm serious. I have notes all over my desk right now. You are amazing, and you can tell you were a school teacher. My background is actually special education and early childhood education. So I understand where the detail comes in. But to thank all of our viewers, I'm so serious. If you missed this, and you paid for the series, you can watch this on a recording. We did record this. And when you watch it again, please have exactly what I have in front of me, a notepad and a
we're
pen.
We're going to put it on YouTube as soon as
Oh,
we get
awesome.
it from you. And so everybody, if you go to the GrantWatch YouTube today, hit subscribe, watch one of the videos. And I just want to say something. When you hear me interviewing, and which I'm going to do the rest of today, interviewing foundations and interviewing nonprofits, you will hear from them that they say what I say. You're going to hear everything I'm saying repeated, everything that's in the book. They're all saying the same thing. So you need to listen to it. It needs to be part of your soul, how to write a grant, so that you're not thinking, wait, what did Libby say? You will know it. You'll be able to come here in 2 years after writing your own grants and just do the same thing I'm doing, teach.
When you got to the end about sustainability, or throughout the entire conversation, about having that passion, I just encourage anybody who's a grants writer, anybody working in the nonprofit sector. I know we have different levels and people have different responsibilities, but when you're out there talking, or like you said with the elevator pitch, or when you're writing, you have to have authentic passion for the mission and for what you're asking for. If not, that's not going to come through. And I could talk to you for hours, Libby. Seriously, thank you, thank you, thank you so much to our amazing guest, Libby Hikind, the queen of grants.
I'll hold the
And
book up just for everybody.
there's the
If you
book,
want to
The
find
Queen
it
of
on
Grants, from
Amazon.
teacher to grant writer to CEO. Go to GrantWatch, get the information that you need to be successful in grants writing. And we appreciate everyone who tuned in this week.
Thank you for the good work that you do.
Thank you all so much for being a part of this incredible series, leadership series. We look forward to seeing you all again next week.